Savannah, Georgia, 2008. A city that doesn't move quickly, it hums. The air itself feels heavy here, thick with humidity and memory. Oak trees hang low with Spanish moss, and the streets seem to remember every secret they've ever heard. On summer evenings, the air smells like magnolia, and rain sweet and uneasy at the same time. On the edge of town, behind a curtain of trees, stood the Bennett house. 2 stories of pale wood and shuttered windows, a wide porch that creaked even when no one walked on it. It had been in the Bennett family for 3 generations, the kind of home that still hosted Sunday dinners and kept photographs of ancestors who'd never met a camera smile. That evening, June 21st, 2008, the house was glowing from within. Emily Rose Bennett, 26, had invited a few close friends over. She wasn't one for loud gatherings. People remembered her as calm, soft-spoken, someone who carried gentleness in her voice. She taught literature at the community college, loved poetry, and had a small habit of humming when she graded papers. Her friends said she'd seemed fine that night, a little distracted, maybe tired, but fine. The conversation was quiet, the wine was good, and by 10 o'clock the guests began to leave. Rain had started falling, the kind that tapped politely on the window panes. One of the guests, her colleague Amanda, remembered Emily standing by the window with a half-full glass of Merlot, smiling faintly at something only she could see. Amanda turned to say goodbye, and that was the last time anyone saw Emily Bennett alive. The next morning, the housekeeper, an older woman named Lorraine, arrived at 8. She found the front door slightly open. The hallway smelled like perfume and storm air. Inside, one of the dining chairs was on its side. A strand of pearls lay scattered on the carpet, and on the table by the window that same wine glass, still half full, with a faint lipstick mark on the rim. Lorraine called Emily's mother first, then the police. By noon, the quiet house was filled with uniforms and flashlights, voices speaking softly, as if not to wake something sleeping. There was no sign of forced entry, no broken windows, no footprints on the porch. Her purse and phone were still there. Car keys, untouched. Detectives searched every inch of the property, including the overgrown garden and the shed behind the house. Nothing. It was as though Emily had simply walked into the rain and disappeared. In the early days of the investigation, suspicion fell, as it often does on those closest to her. Her boyfriend had an alibi, a flight to Atlanta, confirmed by airport records. Her colleagues had all gone home before 11. The last person to admit seeing her was Thomas Caldwell, a family friend and accountant who'd stopped by earlier that evening. Caldwell told police he'd come over to help Emily sort through some business papers her father had asked him to handle. He said he left around 9. He even joined the volunteer search effort the following week, handing out flyers and helping organize the neighborhood patrols. With no body, no clear motive, and no forensic evidence that could hold up, the investigation lost momentum. The glass with the lipstick stain was bagged and sent to the lab, but in 2008, touch DNA was still unreliable. The lipstick's chemical base had likely destroyed any usable genetic material. After months of silence, the case went cold. One more box on a shelf in the Savannah Police Department's basement. 15 years passed. The Bennett family home was sold to strangers. The magnolia tree in the yard kept blooming every spring, and the missing posters faded to paper ghosts. By 2023, the Savannah Police Department had changed almost entirely. New building, new faces, new technology. But one thing hadn't changed: the cold case room. A long corridor of cardboard boxes labeled with names and years, each representing a story that never got an ending. Detective Clara Monroe had only been in the unit 6 months. She wasn't from Savannah, she'd transferred from Atlanta, but she'd always had a fascination with unfinished stories. She believed every silence had an echo if you listened long enough. It was late one afternoon when she pulled a random box from the shelf. Bennett, Emily R., 2008. The lid lifted with a soft sigh, like it remembered being opened before. Inside, photographs, reports, a few evidence bags, and one plastic container holding the wine glass. The faint lipstick print still curved along its edge, like a smile trapped in time. Clara read the old reports slowly. Back then, the lead investigator had done everything by the book, canvassed the area, interviewed everyone, tested what could be tested. But the science had limits. Today, it didn't. She carried the glass to the lab and handed it to Devin Cole, the department's forensic specialist. "This one's ancient," he said, squinting at the evidence tag. "It's from 2008, Clara said. "They tested for fingerprints and got nothing. Try the new process, touch DNA, low copy analysis. The whole works." He gave her a look that mixed skepticism with curiosity. "After 15 years, the chances are—" "I know," Clara interrupted gently, "but try anyway. Savannah owes this girl a result." Devin smiled faintly. "All right, detective, let's wake up the past." It took 2 weeks. When the results finally came in, Devin found Clara in her office. "You might want to sit down for this one," he said. She didn't. He handed her a printout. "We got something." Not much. A partial male DNA profile, recovered from the rim of the glass. She blinked. "Male? On her glass?" He nodded. "Yeah, that's what surprised me too. And get this, when we ran it through CODIS, no match. But forensic genealogy picked up a family connection. The name Caldwell came up 3 times. Clara's brow furrowed. She opened the old report again, and there it was. Thomas Caldwell, age 52 at the time. Family friend, accountant, last to see her alive. "Please tell me he's still alive," she said. Devin nodded. "Still in Savannah. Runs a small consulting firm. Married. No kids." Clara exhaled. "Let's go pay him a visit." Thomas Caldwell's office sat downtown, in a red brick building that looked like it had been polished for a magazine spread. He was older, now grayer, heavier, but still the kind of man who smiled with practiced warmth. When Clara introduced herself and explained why she was there, his smile flickered just once, then returned. "Detective, this is ancient history," he said lightly. "I remember that case, poor girl. I helped with the search. Terrible thing." "Yes," Clara said. "You were the last to see her alive. So I was told back then. I cooperated fully. You did. And your statement hasn't changed in 15 years? Not a word." "Good," Clara said. "Then you won't mind helping us confirm that." He frowned, polite confusion creeping in. "What do you mean?" "We recovered a new DNA sample from one of the old evidence items, a wine glass from that night. The genetic profile connects to your family. I'm here to ask if you'll provide a voluntary DNA sample to rule yourself out." A pause, just long enough for his smile to harden at the edges. "Well," he said after a moment, "if it helps close the case, of course." He handed over the sample that same day, cheek swab, signed consent. 3 days later, the results came back. Match. 99.98% probability. The following morning was gray and humid when Clara walked into his office again. He looked up from his desk, and for the first time, his smile didn't come. "I assume this isn't a courtesy visit," he said. "No," Clara replied. "We found your DNA on the glass from Emily Bennett's dining room. You told us you left at 9. Witnesses place her alive at 10:30. I'd like you to explain the 2 missing hours." He stared at her, then leaned back, the chair creaking. "DNA isn't a confession," he said quietly. "You can't prove what it means." "You're right," Clara said. "It only means you were there, close enough to share a glass of wine with her." He said nothing. Clara opened her notebook. "You knew Emily since she was a child. You worked for her father's company. She trusted you. So tell me, Thomas, what happened that night?" For a long time, he didn't answer. The rain began again outside, tapping against the glass. Finally, he sighed. "She called me that evening," he said. "Said she'd found something in the company files, something she didn't understand. I told her I'd come over and explain. I'd done the family's books for years. Her father trusted me." He looked down at his hands. She was upset. She said there were missing funds transfers that didn't add up. I tried to calm her down. She didn't want to listen. She said she'd go to the police, to the papers. His voice thinned. She was angry. She turned to leave, and I grabbed her arm. She tried to pull away. The glass tipped, broke. She fell. It was an accident. She hit her head on the corner of the table. Clara didn't speak. I didn't mean to hurt her, he whispered. I thought she'd wake up, but she didn't, and the storm was getting worse. I panicked. I moved her, took the car, drove out toward the river. He closed his eyes. I thought the water would take her. I told myself it was mercy. It wasn't. It was fear. He fell silent. The room filled with the low hum of the air conditioner and the sound of rain. Clara finally said, "You knew that glass was evidence. You washed it, didn't you?" He nodded slowly. "I thought I'd wiped everything clean." "You didn't," Clara said. "You left yourself right there, in a trace of lipstick." That night, police divers found Emily Bennett's car in the marshlands north of the river. Inside, fragments of clothing, a bracelet, and traces of human remains confirmed the truth her family had feared for 15 years. When the news reached Emily's mother, she said only one sentence: "I always knew she was still close to home." Savannah went quiet that week. In the downtown cafes and shaded porches, people spoke her name again, not as rumor, but as memory. And in her office, Detective Clara Monroe sat alone with the evidence bag on her desk, the glass sealed and labeled, the faint lipstick mark, now a symbol of everything time had tried to bury. She switched off her lamp, and in the dim glow from the window, the glass caught the light one last time, a glimmer of red where truth had waited, patient as the southern rain. Morning came slow over Savannah, stretching light through the low clouds and dripping moss. The rain had stopped sometime before dawn, but the streets were still damp, shining faintly like something newly washed. The city, for all its beauty, had learned long ago how to hide its sorrow under its porches, beneath its trees, behind polite smiles. Detective Clara Monroe watched the city wake from the courthouse steps, coffee cooling in her hand. The night before had been long interviews, warrants, and a dozen reporters who smelled blood before dawn. She wasn't fond of cases that turned into headlines. She preferred quiet endings, the kind you could fold away in a file and let rest. But this case was different. Savannah had been whispering Emily Bennett's name for 15 years. Now the city wanted to hear it one more time, this time with a period at the end. Inside the courthouse, the air felt heavier, the marble walls cold and echoing. Thomas Caldwell sat at the defendant's table, wearing the same gray suit he'd worn for years at church. His hair was thinner, his confidence gone. In front of him, a single microphone waited, and behind him, the gallery filled with the hum of small-town interest, the curious, the grieving, the judgmental. Clara sat behind the prosecution table, close enough to see him but far enough to disappear if she needed to. She wasn't testifying that morning, not yet. Assistant District Attorney Martha Keene would handle the opening, her voice measured and deliberate. "Ladies and gentlemen of the jury," she began, "this is a case about trust, about a family friend who was welcomed into a young woman's home and took advantage of that trust. For 15 years, he let her mother live without answers, while he built a life of comfort built on lies. We're here because science and time finally refused to stay quiet." The jurors listened. They were older, mostly Savannah citizens who remembered the missing posters, who'd seen Emily's face on the evening news in 2008. Many of them had believed she'd simply run away. Now they stared at the man who'd helped organize the search parties, the same man who'd stood in the rain with flashlights and prayers. Caldwell's lawyer, a quiet man named William Greer, stood and gave the usual defense opening: the accident, the panic, the grief. He spoke softly, appealing to their sense of Southern decency. "Thomas Caldwell is not a monster," he said. "He made a terrible mistake and lived with it every day since. The law must see the difference between a crime of malice and one of fear." When he sat down, Caldwell didn't look at anyone. His hands rested on the table, still, like two sleeping animals. The prosecution began with the evidence, the glass, the DNA, the confession. They played the recording of Caldwell's statement, his voice quiet but unmistakable. "I thought she'd wake up. I didn't mean to hurt her." Those words hung in the air like a bad echo. The courtroom was silent, except for the faint squeak of a reporter's pen. When it was Clara's turn, she stepped up and swore in. The oath felt heavier than usual. "Detective Monroe," the prosecutor asked, "when did you first reopen the Bennett case?" "In April of this year," Clara said. "I was reviewing unresolved disappearances when I came across the file." "What made you test the wine glass again after so long?" Clara smiled faintly, a gesture without joy. "Because the file said there was nothing left to find. In my experience, that's usually not true." The jury chuckled softly. A few leaned forward, listening harder. She explained the new forensic process, how even a microscopic skin cell could yield DNA now, how genealogy databases had become the map of modern truth. She described how the name Caldwell had surfaced, how the match confirmed it. When she finished, the prosecutor asked, "Detective, after 15 years, what convinced you that this case could still speak?" Clara looked down at her hands. "Because silence doesn't mean peace," she said. "It just means nobody's listening." The defense cross-examined her gently, trying to nudge doubt into the science. "Detective," Greer asked, "you said the DNA was partial. Isn't it possible this result was a coincidence?" "Possible?" Clara repeated. "Anything's possible, but not likely. The probability of another individual sharing that profile is less than 1 in 2 billion. Greer nodded. "And you said the lipstick might have degraded the DNA?" "It did," Clara said, "but it preserved enough. Lipstick's like varnish, it seals things in." The jury nodded. Greer knew then that he'd lost the technical ground. He tried one last angle. "Detective, do you think Thomas Caldwell is evil?" Clara paused, studying him. "I think he's human," she said, "and that's usually where the trouble starts." The trial stretched on for weeks. Expert witnesses talked about blood trace, water damage, probability curves. The jury learned more about forensic chemistry than any of them ever wanted to. But the emotional weight came from the people, the mother, the friends, the community that had aged 15 years waiting for a door to close. Lynn Bennett, Emily's mother, took the stand near the end. She was smaller now, hair silvered, voice steady as stone. She held a photo of Emily in her hands the whole time, thumb resting over the frame like a quiet promise. "I used to dream," she said softly, "that she'd come home. I'd see a car on the drive, and for a second I'd think maybe. Then I'd remember the quiet. You never forget that kind of quiet. It's louder than anything." The defense didn't question her. They knew better. On the final day, Caldwell himself chose to testify. It surprised everyone, even his lawyer. He walked to the stand with slow steps, eyes down, as if the floorboards might break under him. "I won't ask for forgiveness," he began. "You can't forgive what you can't undo. But I want the truth to be said by me, not someone else." He told the story again, this time without the justifications, without the clever turns. "She found out I'd moved money around in the company," he said. "It wasn't theft. Not at first, just shifting accounts, making things look better. Her father trusted me. She found the papers and confronted me. I tried to calm her. She said she'd tell. I grabbed her arm. She stumbled. I don't know if I pushed or she slipped, but when she fell, she didn't get up." He wiped his face once with a trembling hand. "I drove her to the river. I thought the current would hide my shame, but it didn't. It just buried it deeper." He turned to Lynn Bennett in the gallery. "I can't ask you to forgive me, but I want you to know I never stopped hearing her voice." Lynn didn't reply. She only looked at him, eyes clear, no tears left. The prosecutor let the silence linger before saying quietly, "The state rests." The jury deliberated for 6 hours. When they returned, no one moved. Even the ceiling fan seemed to stop. "On the charge of second-degree murder," the foreman read, "we find the defendant guilty." No sound came from Caldwell. He just nodded once, as if someone had finally confirmed what he already knew. When the judge spoke the sentence, 25 years to life, he whispered something only the bailiff heard. "It's still raining in my head." After the verdict, the courthouse emptied slowly, people filing out into the heat. Clara stepped outside last. The air smelled of wet pavement and honeysuckle. Lynn Bennett stood near the steps, holding the photo frame. For a moment, they simply stood together, not speaking. Finally, Lynn said, "When they told me about the glass that had her lipstick, I kept thinking she was alive when she touched it. She was still here. That helps. Somehow." Clara nodded. "Sometimes the smallest thing is all we get. Sometimes it's enough." Lynn smiled faintly. "Do you think she was afraid?" Clara looked toward the clouds gathering again. "Maybe for a moment," she said, "but I think the rain came fast enough to hide it." They stood there until the first drops began to fall. Again, soft, familiar, almost kind. Weeks passed. Savannah settled back into its rhythm. Caldwell's business closed quietly. His house went up for sale. Reporters moved on to newer stories, brighter tragedies. In the cold case office, Clara boxed up the Bennett file. She slipped a printed photo of the lipstick-marked glass inside, along with the court verdict, and a single note in her handwriting. "Case closed, justice delayed, not denied." She sealed it, taped the edges, and set it gently on the shelf. Another ghost, put to rest. But that night, long after everyone else had gone home, she found herself driving without planning to out toward the river. The sky was bruised with stormlight, and the trees whispered like old women sharing secrets. She parked near the marsh where they'd found Emily's car. The water was calm now, the surface smooth as glass. Clara stepped down to the edge. The ground was soft, the air thick and buzzing. Fireflies floated above the reeds, blinking like quiet souls. She took a small bouquet of magnolias from the passenger seat and set them adrift. They drifted out slowly, spinning once before the current carried them away. She didn't speak. There was no one to hear. But in her head, she thought of all the people whose stories sat in boxes, waiting for a name, a breath, a last word. Somewhere in the distance, thunder rolled soft and low, like a reminder. The storm was coming again. The next morning, she came into the office early. On her desk was a new case folder, left by the night shift. No name yet, just a label. Unidentified 2009. She smiled faintly. The work never ended. It only changed names. Devin leaned in from the doorway. "You're in early," he said. "Couldn't sleep," Clara replied. "The rain started again." He nodded. "There's a pattern, huh?" "There always is," she said. She opened the folder and began to read. Outside, the rain whispered against the glass, steady, rhythmic, like breathing. She looked up once more at the wall of boxes, hundreds of them, each one holding a story that had refused to stay quiet. And she thought of Emily Bennett, the woman with the wine glass, the lipstick, the truth that survived 15 years of silence. In Savannah, stories never truly die. They just wait for the right kind of rain. That afternoon, the Student Senate at the community college held a small memorial. They placed a plaque beneath a magnolia tree on campus, the same kind Emily had passed every morning on her way to class. It read, "In memory of Emily Rose Bennett, 1982, 2008. She taught us that truth may sleep, but it never dies." Clara didn't attend the ceremony. She preferred to remember in motion, not in stone. Instead, she drove through the older parts of the city, where the sidewalks cracked under the weight of time, and the air smelled faintly of rain and earth. She stopped by a coffee shop, a new one built near the courthouse, and ordered a cup to go. The barista, not knowing who she was, smiled and wrote C on the lid with a black marker. Clara smiled back, almost despite herself. She stepped outside, under the awning, watching as another storm gathered across the river. People hurried past, pulling up umbrellas, but she didn't move. The first drop hit her wrist, cool and clean, washing away the heat. She took a sip of coffee and whispered to no one, "Here's to you, Emily. You got your ending." Then she turned toward the precinct, the rain blurring the world into silver, and walked into it without hurrying, as if the city, with all its old ghosts, could finally rest for a while.